Hi everyone, welcome to Can Trees Be Elders? I'm Marissa, and this is the first of two back-to-back 30-minute live streams. Mine today is going to be on Can Trees Be Elders, and then my sister Kirsten is doing Mapacho as a plant spirit tomorrow at the same time. So I'm very happy to see you all. Just want to say hi to Christina and Freya. Thank you so much for showing up live. Just to do a little bit of housekeeping, this will be available as a replay along with a free gift to anyone who signs up or to members of the Patreon. And I will put the link for that at the end of the live stream. So just want to say hi, CJ, hi, Freya. Good morning, everyone. The other little bit of housekeeping is that sometimes I can't see your questions. So if for some reason I miss something that you say, I'll go through the live stream comments at the end, or if you're watching this later, and I'm happy to answer questions if I can. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes, close your eyes. If not, just listen along. So I'm going to ask for a little help now. Okay, so this is an interesting and very important topic to me because I think it kind of, it addresses one of the important needs that we have at this time, particularly for those of us who are Western, who grew up in Western culture, who are getting into shamanism that's not our traditional culture. We've either been brought into it through an awakening or some other experience, and we're trying to create a tradition, almost out of like a handful of hints. And many of us have been fortunate enough to study with indigenous elders and teachers, but we're also trying to bring back our own traditions. So this live stream is going to speak a little bit to that, as well as a little bit about the indigenous experience. So hey Marta, hey Kirsten, good morning. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is an elder. And I just want to let you know, I do have some notes. I may be looking down a little bit, so I'll try not to do that too much, but don't be surprised if I do it. So basically, in a traditional culture, an elder is a person who carries the responsibility of holding at least a piece of the traditional knowledge, usually to guide younger people. The elders also have an important job of initiating the young and training them to become responsible adults so that they can connect with the ancestors in a good way and keep the balance and harmony within the community, and basically also so they can fulfill their destiny. So elder kind of is a term that covers a lot of different responsibilities. I'm going to be talking about the aspect of elderhood that has to do with initiating the young, particularly healers, and also acting as a sort of guide or an advisor. So my experience with this is that, like many people, I was sort of bewailing one day the fact that because we don't have a tradition, because it's probably going to take us more than one generation to create one, that for myself, I wish that like Native people, I could occasionally go to an elder because we have so few of them in our culture. And, you know, for example, I was listening to one Native teacher who was talking about how in his life, he's always had an elder since he was in his 20s. And he's never been without that in his life. And I was just thinking, you know, when we're going through these very difficult and challenging times, it would really help if we had something like this. And all of a sudden, outside, I was at home, and there's an oak tree that I interact with frequently that's right outside my door. And I have sort of a clairaudient connection with this tree. And suddenly I heard the words, "I'm an elder. You can talk to me." And I was like, okay. I mean, I'd learned at that point in my experience with connecting with spirits in nature that I could trust this. It wasn't me being crazy or imagining it. But I just didn't understand how that would function. Like, how could I go to a tree and have the same experience that I would have with a person, with a human being? And so gradually over time, this oak tree began to educate me in the ways that I could approach the spirit and work with it the same way I would talk to an older human being who understood the traditions. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about how other people have experienced this within Western culture as well. Also, the other thing that happened at this time was that I was lucky enough to hear the plant spirit healer Pam Montgomery. And she said that she had had the same experience with a white pine that was on her property, and that she had come to believe that trees and plants were our elders at this time, helping to initiate us and helping to initiate the young in partnership with those of us who maybe are a little older, because we don't have elderhood established yet as a strong part of our tradition. We're working on it. It's a work in process. And the plants have stepped up at this time to help us and to train us. So let me see if there's any... Hi, Simona. How you doing? So I want to talk a little bit just about trees as complex spirits. Trees basically can be, obviously, they've been sacred in many, many cultures. Sometimes they're sacred as representations of the world tree. And that's true in many, many cultures. The Maya, there's many, many cultures where I think the Norse have the ash tree. Sometimes the sacred tree is an important medicinal or food tree. But there's also an idea that trees can be one of the nature spirits that evolved ancestors come back and inhabit in order to be of service to the living. And I think in the Amazon, I posted one of the experiences that a maestra had, an ayahuasquera had, where she was basically interacting with trees that had multiple spirits. And when you learn to work with these trees, the multiple spirits do different jobs. Some of these are probably evolved ancestors who came back to be of service to the living. The Norse people had this idea. I think they called it landvater. And the Celts, they're famous for their oak groves, where they would go and in the British Isles, people will still do this. They'll take a particular tree and they may bring offerings of, they might tie cloths to them. It used to be traditional to bring food. Sometimes also beautiful things, especially made out of metal, were given to the trees. And at least in ancestry, there are people who believe that these were presented as a means to receive messages, to receive guidance. So there's a tradition of this in many parts of the world. But in our case, it's slightly different because the trees not only are functioning the way they would in a traditional culture, but they're kind of helping us, partnering with us to become better elders so that one day we'll become better ancestors and will be of more service to the descendants and also to the living. So I basically also want to say a little bit about the tradition in some cultures of, like in the Irish traditions, where they kept a lot of their tree wisdom. It was considered really bad idea to chop down a hawthorn tree because they were a home for the fairies. And there's a couple of other trees that have this significance of being a home for the fairies. And some people believe that fairies are sort of a catch-all term for deities, ancestors, and nature spirits. So there's probably a little bit of an idea there that you were also dialoguing somewhat with the wise ancestors. Marita Esteva, love it. Oh, this is wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for being here. So I want to talk a little bit now about how you can actually connect your energy field with a tree. Because the first step in working with trees as elders, besides the practice of offerings, is you have to have some way that your aura connects with the aura of the tree so that the communication can happen. How the communication happens will probably depend on your gifts. I'm a little bit clairaudient, so I tend to hear. Some people may, I also feel, some people may feel. It's not uncommon to see the tree spirits, like the elders, like a fairy or something like that. Excuse me. I just need to sneeze here. It's also not uncommon to receive like a nature omen. For example, one of the signals I have that a particular tree is willing to work with me is that when I ask, a leaf may fall at that moment. So that would be more like a nature omen, or a bird may show up on the branch and make a sound, you know. So that's a little bit more of a okay to proceed kind of message from the trees. The other thing that you want to know is when you start to work with the tree, you want to pick a tree that you have permission to work with. The difference, and Sandra Ingerman mentioned this in her talk about nature spirits, the difference between working like in the middle world where we inhabit now is that you're working with an individual tree rather than all oak trees, like the spirit of all oak trees or the spirit of all maple trees. So you kind of have a relationship with one individual tree. So you want to know that that tree wants to work with you, and some will and some won't. My suspicion is that some of the ones who want to work with us usually have some connection with ancestral spirits, but I don't know that that's 100% true. But I that's my sense. So the first thing you want to do is identify a tree that wants to work with you. The second thing you want to do, I think it helps to leave offerings. The reason why I think it's helpful is because it's considered etiquette. In other words, part of asking for anyone in a traditional culture, like an elder, to do something for you is to give them like an offering, like some food or a ritual gift. It's just a way of saying, you know, please. And after I'm done, I leave something, and it can be as simple as, like, if you have some drinking water, you can leave some water. It doesn't have to be something complicated. But it helps if it's something that you value. I personally use tobacco because I live in North America, and I found that the land spirits seem to understand tobacco. It seems to get their attention. But it doesn't have to be that. Just pick the one that works for you. So let me just answer a question. Me too. Energy exchange, Freya. Yes, absolutely. I need. Yes, that's the core of all relationships, for the way I was taught. Yeah. So once you have permission and you've sort of said please, then it's really okay to go in and begin to work with this tree because they've stepped up and said, I want to do this for you. So one of the ways that if I'm assuming that many of you are highly intuitive and your auras are already connected. But let's just say someone's watching and, you know, when they go up to a tree, they're just looking at a tree. They don't feel anything, they don't hear anything, nothing. Well, for that person, it might be helpful for your energy field to learn to attune to the tree. And one exercise that I was taught, Alberto Villoldo's people teach this, is to stand with your back to a tree and you open up each of your energy centers. And you open them by moving in basically a counterclockwise motion from the center of your chakra to the outside. And then when you want to close it back up, you do the opposite. You go in. You go from the outside in. And I explain this in the exercise, in the free gift. But basically what you're doing is you're doing this with each of the centers, and you're letting the tree and the tree roots and the energy of the tree draw that energy out. And you're letting the light come in from the tree. And then, of course, you close your chakras back up and go about your day. The reason why this really works, especially if you're beginning, is because it not only teaches you how to be grounded, but it really begins you to get that rapport of like your field is connected to the tree's field. And so between that and offerings, the tree will communicate with you even when you're not there. But it may come through dreams. It may come through whatever talents you happen to have. And everyone has talents. So let me see. Christina, this is really helpful because I have 2 large cedars on my property that I want to work with to create my own rune set. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, that would be powerful. Yeah. Yeah, anytime you want to work with the medicine of a tree, it does help to at least ask permission to work with that particular tree, in my experience. So the other thing that I've worked with is once you get a little bit more advanced and you feel like you really have a rapport with the tree, the other way to work with it is, I went through a time where I was really, really under a lot of stress. I was working in a fun job, but it was very demanding. And I really felt like my energy was scattered. So I would stand with my back to a tree that I had permission to work with, and the tree began to help me understand when I was too connected to my feet. In other words, I wasn't up enough, my energy wasn't up enough, and I wasn't receiving light, and I wasn't seeing the big picture in my life, or when I was too flaky and spacey and ungrounded and needed to be more in my feet. It also helped me map any blockages that were going on in my energy field. So trees can help you become more mindful and aware of your own energy field. And as you become more connected to your energy field, the trees become more available as psychic messages. Now, at first, they may tell you little etiquette things like, don't step on my roots.